Hey everybody, welcome back to Up the Vibe. And today I have returning guests, Paul and Syann, to continue our discussion on the Zetas. Hi guys, how are you doing?
Hi.
G'day, Joe. How's it going? Yeah, we're good.
Yeah,
Good.
good.
Well, welcome back. I wonder if you could start by giving a quick introduction for those who may have not listened to the first one, and also maybe talk a bit about what you've been up to since we last spoke.
Okay, well, we've been mediums a long time, and we work with spirit people, and we also have very good contact with the Zetas. And we've evidenced our contact multiple times. We work with a lot of people that have experiences. A lot of those people are seeking to understand or resolve their contact as well. And so we do spend a lot of time talking to people as well. So a lot of our day is based around supporting and helping other people.
Yeah, and that's pretty much what we've been up to since we last spoke to you.
Okay.
Yeah.
I saw you recently on a podcast with Grant Cameron though as well. So you have been continuing to do podcasts and do interviews and things. That's good. I wonder if we could start on talking a little bit about the agendas that are being talked about, in particular with the Greys. So I first heard about the Zetas or beings from Zeta Reticuli when we heard about Bob Lazar and George Knapp and back in the day. And there was a lot of talk then about the Greys having quite a nefarious agenda for planet Earth. But having spoken to you, and also given that Stephen Greer says you shouldn't have speciesism, as he calls it, as in if you hear the word Grey or Zeta Reticuli, you shouldn't jump to conclusions. And I'm sure just like on Earth, there are good and bad Greys, good and bad beings on Zeta Reticuli. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the various agendas from the Zetas and a bit about maybe the agendas of the beings you've been talking to and communicating with.
Okay, well, there's basically 63 races that belong to the Grey species. And the problem is with any type of interaction between extraterrestrials and humans, humans are on the back foot for a start, because what they're looking at is the phenomenon. They see the phenomenon going on around them, so they're being contacted, they may have paranormal activity, these sorts of things. But they can't see what's going on behind the phenomenon. And that's the problem. And I think that the beings themselves are also having a problem with the phenomenon themselves. So when they're working with humans, they're seeing humans through another lens. At some point, we've got to come into the middle of all this. There has to be some level of contact protocol that's got to take place. The Zetas are looking at how to develop a contact protocol that will encapsulate all of the people that it's related to. So rather than just, a contact protocol for, 1 or 2 or 10 people, what is a contact protocol for the planet and for the people that are being contacted? The Zetas understand that there are, people that believe that they are up to no good. And I can understand that, because people would say, well, they're coming into our house and, they're taking us and we're being contacted and all these things. But if we understand that we take our children to the doctors, they get a needle and, it may be painful for the child at that point, it's something that the child wouldn't recognise as being potentially good for them. But it's only when they're older that they realise that the parent was looking after them. So a lot of the contact that's happening with people is happening because those people have some level of contact with extraterrestrials. That's one of the first things. Of course, there is a race, and there are other races as well, that don't particularly care about humans too much, and they look at the behaviour of humans on a daily basis. And I'm suggesting that they would be thinking, well, why should we treat them any better than they treat their own people on their own planet, their own livestock on their own planet? Look at the current situation that we have on this planet. And so humans are very interesting, because their expectation is that a race will, be of a much higher vibration, a much higher level of consciousness But there are races out there that aren't. And they would be treating humans the way that humans treat each other. So I find it a bit amusing that humans will expect that they'll be treated differently than the way that they treat each other. What do you think about that, Joe?
No, I agree to an extent. I feel like there's some beings that are treating us like in a kindergarten or primary school, if you would like, to try and teach us and to try and give us care whilst we trip over and fall, and learn from our mistakes and move forward. And there are other beings that are treating us like we treat animals in a farm, as a resource. And I believe that it could be that the Greys are in both camps in terms of how we're being treated.
I will speak to that, though. I will speak to that. So remember I said there were 63 races of a species. There are one race that we just call them the abductors, because they don't abide by free will, whereas the Zetas do. The Zetas always ask permission to perform certain procedures with people, but the abductors don't. And what's happened with those beings is they're actually not part of the collective consciousness of the race of the Zetas anyway. That's been a real issue. It's like having, a country that's actually at war with itself, fighting within itself. You can't get a consensus reality. You can't get a consensus opinion when there's, sort of a disagreement between a race. They're trying to work with that because, as you've seen yourself, there's a lot of disclosure around UAP, USO, Congress, all these sorts of things. And so the races themselves are going, well, we need to somehow build some sort of consensus where we're able to, at some point, disclose to these humans and present disclosure in a way that they'll understand. This is becoming a big issue.
I think it's also worth bearing in mind how extraterrestrial races perceive humans and what we class as animals on this planet. They don't see humans and what we call animals. They just see a multitude of different races. And so from the perception of the extraterrestrial races out there that don't appear to have much consideration for the free will of the human race, when they're looking at what goes on this planet, they're not seeing how humans treat animals. They're viewing how humans treat other races, how one race has complete disregard in what they're perceiving as activity on this planet. Races eating races, races starving races, races that have the resources to end homelessness, end starvation planet-wide, and yet don't. They don't perceive humanity and its relationship with animals as humans do. It's race and other races here for them.
And plants.
Yeah, including plants. That's right. Yeah.
So, I mean, you make a very good point. And of course, we see ourselves as advanced to the plant, to the animals, in the sense that we've got, computers and cars and businesses and big buildings, and they don't. But are you suggesting that from the perspective of Zetas and many other extraterrestrials, that the perception of the animal kingdom, plant kingdom, is at a level playing field with themselves? Or do they just not see? When you say 63 races, does that include somehow plant and animal kingdom? Or is it that is purely...
No, not at all. The 63 races are based around their own species. That they don't even, that's not even including... That's their own species. That's on and off planet.
Species.
The Greys,
But there's a lot of animals as well on their planet.
On their planet, but the way that those beings are treated is that they wouldn't be eaten.
Yeah, and I agree, and I think we need to progress to a point where we stop eating other animals.
Oh, good. That's great.
Yeah. I mean, I've kind of gone as vegetarian as possible since the start of this year. Actually, my wife's vegetarian, and I've had quite a vegetarian diet, but I would eat meat occasionally. But now I'm really trying to cut out meat altogether. So, just doing my bit,
Yeah.
but I'm hoping that, you know, in years to come,
a lot of people are. I think
yeah.
a lot, and also with the economy the way it is, I think a lot of people are starting to rethink the way that they eat.
Yeah. I was camping at the weekend, and there was they were doing curry for everyone, and there was 4 options. 1 was meat and 3 were vegetarian. And when I got to the to pay, it was the 3 vegetarian options that had pretty much gone, and it was the meat one that was still there. I don't know if that, I mean, that's not evidence, but it's a sign, isn't it, that people are looking more to the vegetarian option. Just as a little aside there. Yeah.
It's pretty healthy as well. So
yes, I feel like when if I do have meat, my body says it says don't do that again. in its
well,
own way.
you're eating frequency, basically.
Yeah.
That's what's happening.
Yeah. What's your thoughts actually on that? I've been told by some people that if you eat grass-fed animal that's been treated well, then that's not as bad. Or is that just a no?
I totally disagree with that.
Yeah.
I think if any animal is killed so that it can be eaten, it doesn't matter how well you're fed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I agree. But it's an interesting, and maybe that is a way forward because we can't go all vegetarian immediately. So maybe that's a stepping stone in there as we as the planet try and get there.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
It's a stepping stone.
I want to move on to Skinwalkers at the Pentagon, which is a book I read not long ago, and I think you mentioned in a recent podcast that you wanted to talk about that. So I wanted to ask you a few questions on that. From my perspective, when I read the book, it was very focused on the very negative aspects of the experiences at this Skinwalker Ranch. But from what I understand and hearing more about it from other areas, that there are many positive experiences there too. And it was more about the people that were on the ranch, if they were of a negative mindset, very sort of, I'm going to say militaristic in terms of their mindset, although there could be some good military people out there. That's not to paint them as negative, but if you've got a negative mindset and you go onto the ranch, you'll have negative experiences, and conversely, if you have positive experiences, it's sort of a positive mindset. So I wanted to get your thoughts on the ranch, and also whether you knew of any Zeta involvement there.
I've not actually read the book. That's the first thing. So I can only really go on what you're telling me and other people. I do know some people that have been there. That's the first thing. The only thing I know about the Skinwalker from mainstream media is I actually watched on some sort of documentary on the History Channel. I think it was one of the last ones where they had the helicopter and they were throwing things out of the helicopter trying to work out why the whatever the technology they were using was hitting something and bouncing off, But I would suggest that once again we're talking about the phenomenon. So if you have a negative mindset, then I would suggest that, as in all things, that's what's going to manifest around a person. And if you have a positive mindset, then of course that's what's going to manifest around you as well. It doesn't mean, though, that there aren't things going on there or in many places on the planet. It's more about understanding the phenomenon and what's behind it. Once again, I will keep saying this because engaging the phenomenon, as people are saying, is useless, because the phenomenon itself is just an extension of something else. So you're basically looking at the symptom rather than the root cause. And while people continue to look at the flashing lights and all the colours and everything else, they're totally missing the point that there's something behind that. And that's what people need to be looking at. What is behind the phenomenon, not the phenomenon itself.
Yes, I think within the UFO community, at least, I do see a trend towards being less focused on videos of lights in the sky and more on discussions around the consciousness aspect in particular. That's something I'm particularly interested in. Yeah. And
that's what the Zetas have always talked about, the consciousness aspect. The problem that we've got is as the excitement builds about disclosure and contact, we'll have a lot of people that are channeling, and they are already. But the question I ask people is, well, how do you evidence what you're getting? You know, where do you challenge those words that come through? Where do you ask those supposed entities, you know, where they're from? How can they evidence themselves? Rather than, you know, it's up to you and everybody else. But if people want to continually channel but never evidence those beings in a way where they actually show themselves to a group of people or whatever, it just comes down to there are a lot of trickster elements to the phenomenon as well. There's also a lot of trickster spirit people, and a lot of those spirit people are also understanding that humans also will, rather than evidence their contact, will just buy straight into it. And so we're going to see this fairly large, unfortunate group of people all go off towards the channeling, the woo festival. And at that point in time, I would just suggest to people, just challenge some of the stuff that people are, you know, channeling and see what comes of that. You know, just use a bit of common sense, maybe.
Yeah, channeling is a big part of the phenomenon in terms of trying to understand it. And there are, as you say, potentially some channels that are authentic and others that are tricksters, or maybe, in my view, that some of them may not be tricksters, but they just may be misled, or they think they've been channeling, but they're not. So it's subconscious or some other aspect, but someone
we know though, Joe, that people can channel them, you know, their own we call them subconscious spirits. People's, you know, facets of their own consciousness come forward in a dissociative form, and they can channel themselves. And look, there's nothing wrong with that. Yeah, I'm saying, if you know that that's what you're doing, that's fine. And so, you know, when we sort of are teaching people about how to, you know, bring information through, that's the first thing we do, is we just say to them, just do some inspirational speaking. We know that it is you, and that's fine. But when it comes through that the person's giving supposedly hard information, then you need to say to the being, if it is a being, look, I understand what you're saying. I really appreciate what you're saying. But I need in some way for you to evidence yourself to me so that I can understand where you're coming from. Because you wouldn't go to a medium and they tell you, I've got your grandmother with me, and give you no information to back that up, and then just say, and here's her message. Your expectation would be that the medium would be able to communicate with the spirit person, give enough evidence that the person was absolutely convinced it was their grandmother, and then give the message. But that seems to completely fail when it comes to extraterrestrials. Now, yes, your extraterrestrials aren't your grandmother, but they can certainly do things to evidence themselves. And so, just from a point of clarity, it's more about just saying to people, if you're listening to somebody that's channeling and you've got the opportunity to ask questions, ask them to evidence themselves.
Yeah. One channeler, Dao Lanka, who channels Bashar, is someone I've heard, and I think I heard recently that you found him to be somewhat credible. I'm not going to say that for sure, but what for my evidence, and this is not just him, but he's one. It's not just what's being said; it's how it's being said as well. So, in terms of what's being said, it blows my mind, and maybe it's possible that the Dao Lanka has done enough research and got that information available, so that's possible. But you know, there's a strong, sorry, the light's shining in my face there. There's a strong possibility that the information has been channeled, but it's the biggest evidence for me is the way it's channeled, in the sense that, like I'm doing now, I'm saying a lot of ums and ers, and that's something that's my subconscious is doing as I'm trying to flow with speech. And when Dao Lanka speaks, he does the same. But when he's channeling Bashar, there seems to be no pauses, no ums, ers, and it's all very eloquent and given in a way that I don't think Dao could have practiced himself and got to that level. So that for me that's the only thing I would say is evidence, beyond obviously the things he's saying and some of the very poignant aspects to the channeling.
You see, if you understand that you can splinter your own subconscious, that new personality could easily bypass all of the pausing. There's no issue with that. So that's, to me, it's actually not evidence. So, you know, I mean, it's fine that it's evidence for other people. Evidence for me is when I say to the being, well, where are you from? They go, I'm from that planet out there. Oh, really? Do you have technology? Yes, we use craft. We travel interdimensionally. We do this, and that. Okay, great. Could you come here in 2 weeks' time? Can you land a craft?
Mm-hmm.
Now, if those beings who've been talking over and over and over again about love and light and all of the rest of it and timelines and everything can't even turn up in a craft, I'm not prepared to listen to them at all.
It's the same for beings that, you know, they promise, they state that they're quite easily able to materialize in a room and show themselves.
Yeah.
Which, you know, you hear a lot of when you listen into information given by channelers. And yet the beings never materialize. And when they're questioned, well, why haven't you materialized? Oh, you're not ready yet. Mm-hmm. When you're ready, we'll materialize. And they have the same conversation year in and year out. The conversation never changes. The beings never materialize despite stating they're fully able to. You know, when the Zetas say they're going to do something,
they do it.
They do it. And if they don't do it, we would question them. Well, hang on, you said you would. Why didn't you? We never have to question them. They always do what they're asked or what they say they're going to do.
Okay.
Now, it doesn't mean that they're not perfect. We're not saying they're perfect. They're not saying they're perfect. Things can happen where something may not materialize. But I would be more interested in seeing a being that was doing healing. So if somebody was being healed, you know, so someone that channels as a healer, there's a lot of good healings, medically evidenced healing that's taken place. That's really good evidence as well, isn't it? It's not just words and fancy speech and all those things. It's actually changes being made to people.
Yeah.
And that's what we need on this planet now. We need change.
Positive change.
Yeah, and and not just words. It's just rhetoric. It doesn't mean anything.
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard of people being healed in like places like Mount Shasta and got incredible ways that you can't defy, you know, sort of more medical grounds.
That's right. Yeah, amazing stuff.
I wonder if I could move on to a few areas that get talked about within the community, and I wanted to get your perspective on them. Firstly, on the secret space program and the supposed colonization of Mars and 20 and back and all this, if you're aware of it.
I only know what you probably know more about it than I do, to be honest.
But would you say it's a potential that there are humans that have been going to Mars and coming back?
Oh, I see.
And having their memory erased?
You're not talking about Basiago and the jump room technology and all
that? Potentially. I think I've heard of that as a way of getting to Mars, as in there's like a portal and ability to get there. But apparently there are people coming out and disclosing that they were part of a secret space program and they've had their memory erased after, but they've been doing various I'm sort of quoting what I understand of it, is that they've been doing various sort of QHHT or various other regressions, and they've kind of brought back memories of being part of this secret space program, and this has been going on for decades.
They're doing hypnotherapy and they're disclosing that they're part of a program that they didn't know that they were part of, or they were and then they were given some sort of technology to. Is that what you're saying?
From my perspective, what I can understand is, yes, that they've been part of this program, but as part of the program, they had their memory erased, so they weren't able to remember it, and they were able to carry on with their lives. Then years later, they've regressed and discovered this information. And I'm not sure, but you know, I wanted to see if you had any perspective on that.
Yeah. Well, I know that the synthetic quantum environments are used as a. And we've talked about SQEs before, haven't we?
I know you mentioned it on your recent podcast with Grant Cameron. I can't remember if you mentioned it on our one, so maybe you can briefly talk about that. So
synthetic quantum environments are created by extraterrestrials. They're technology that take a copy of something that's on the timeline and then they mirror it into the SQE. So remember that observation changes things. So we don't want to observe what's the original. We want to observe the copy.
Mm-hmm.
Often they'll take a copy of a planet or a specific area of a planet. They'll put it inside the SQE, and then they'll watch what happens when they take the copy of a person's consciousness and they allow that person to believe that they've actually jumped to Mars.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So there's a lot to this, and this is actually pretty complicated.
It is, and if you don't mind me saying, quite a unique perspective. I don't think I've heard that from anyone else, so it'd be interesting to see.
It's in the SQE stuff's in the primer of the Zeta race, which is a free book for anyone to read.
Yeah.
The Basiago, he talked about jump room technology with Mars.
Basiago talked all about it.
That was quite some time ago now, wasn't it? And if I remember correctly, don't quote me on this, but the thing that he believed that he had been to Mars. He hadn't understood that he'd been in the SQE, and the part of his story that alerted you, I remember you telling me, was the fact that he believed he'd lost his arm on one of these trips, on one of these occasions. He believed when he'd gone to Mars, but on his return, he found that he was perfectly intact. He had both his arms. Now, obviously, if he'd physically been there, he wouldn't have returned with both of his arms. So,
but if we think about it this way, so let's say that I take a copy of you, Joe, and you go into an SQE, you jump to Mars, you lose your arm. When I re-assimilate you back with your originating form, you have the experience of losing your arm, but of course you've got your physical arms. And this is how synthetic quantum environments work. And this is why I say to people, forget about the phenomenon. It's too difficult.
Okay. What do you think we're in a synthetic quantum environment right now?
Yeah, I believe that we are, actually. I believe that on some level, everything around us is a representation of consciousness.
I think, there has been talk within the mainstream science about we're in a not a SQE, but a kind of a virtual reality. It's called within a virtual reality, within a virtual reality, and at some point there's a route. I guess it links to that. Bizarre.
Yeah, well, this
possible.
This is just source consciousness experiencing itself in an externalized state. It's obviously the only way that source can learn is to understand itself externally. So that's why there would be a virtual environment. Yeah.
And my other aspect of the history that I wanted to get your perspective on was that I'm sure you're aware of Operation Paperclip and the move of lots of Nazis over to America and Russia after the Second World War. And apparently that our Nazis also moved to Antarctica and set up base there and have been sort of infiltrating various aspects of government, pharma, technology, media, all these aspects ever since. And they are still plaguing Earth with trying to keep us dumbed down and unable to ascend and also to control us and weaponize every aspect of life in terms of, dividing us in various ways. So what aspects, I guess, of that do you see as potentially the true history of Earth, that the Nazis actually won in a sense, and it was the Germans who lost, the German military who died, but the Nazis themselves, the orchestrators of the growth of Nazism, were just basically relocated and rebuilt, or even just continued?
Yeah, I don't see it that way at all. I see that the Schumann frequency dictates a human's ability to remember their point of origin. I also see that the Schumann frequency also dictates what a person believes about themselves and what they can experience and what they believe to be their ability to be able to create. The extraterrestrials also understand that the Schumann frequency, when a person leaves spirit realm and incarnates as a human, that they then can no longer remember where they've come from, because remember one specific point, you've actually come from somewhere to come here, to be here right now. And then when you leave here, you're going to go back to where you've come from.
Yeah.
And so the extraterrestrials have also used the Schumann frequency as a method to implement multiple screen memory technologies into humans. We've come up with 5 categories of screen memories that we've come across with people while working with them. And it's easy for us to see that rather than focusing on the narrative, which is the things that we believe to be true about human history, we need to be looking at the things like, what is the frequency of the planet? What happens to somebody when they come into the human form? And why is it they can no longer remember specific things about their past? And once we start to understand those concepts, then of course we can understand that we're actually creators living inside a virtual environment. It's the environment that's actually trying to keep us at a specific frequency. Mm. Example, you meditate and you move up in vibration and frequency. You don't stay there, because once you come out of your meditative state, you then go back down slowly, slowly, slowly to a more physical, grounded state. But while in that meditative state, you could have a lot of interaction with interdimensional entities, with energies, frequencies, those sorts of things. But you don't get them when you're down grounded, okay? And so we have to really look at, is the human race being kept at the specific level that it's at by the planet? And is it the planet, the frequency that is surrounding the Schumann frequency? Is that really the physical cause of people not being able to move through into higher states and access most of their abilities that they have? Okay,
so what I can gather is that I'm not sure if you said that the true, there's a narrative about history that we're told at school, and then there's this other narrative that we're told. But what you're saying is that we shouldn't look to that for reasons for why we are being kept at our certain frequency and why we're not ascending. So
I'm saying, I'll be very clear here. I'm saying it's got nothing to do with what you're told to believe. It's got a lot to do with the frequency that you're being held in. I'll ask you a question. Where did you come from before you were born?
Well, I think maybe from spirit realm, maybe I had a past life on Earth, maybe elsewhere.
Okay. So a lot of maybes, and that's fine. But why is it that you can't remember that? You're a being of consciousness. Mm-hmm. Why can't you remember that?
Well, I've thought about that, and I think it's actually quite a powerful tool of consciousness to be able to incarnate in a way and have that kind of memory wipe, because I think if you had the full realization of eternity, it's quite a daunting thing actually. So sometimes you need to be able to memory wipe and relive to make the experience of eternity livable.
Yeah. So I understand that. There are a lot of different schools of thought in regards to this. Mm-hmm. We come here and forget, because if we knew who we were, we wouldn't enjoy the experience because we knew where we came from. But then again, we've got other people that are able to break through that and actually understand and remember where they've come from. Mm-hmm. These are classes, what are called point of origin discussions that we have with people. So there is the capacity within the human consciousness to actually move past these things that would try to nullify our ability to be able to move forwards and minimize us. But we need to be able to see that potential within ourselves to do that.
Yeah, but you've made me think, though, it is a free will planet, and maybe from a higher perspective, some people have come down here just to live and not be too worried about ascension, just have the experience.
Oh, absolutely. So, there are many people that are here that are just going through the motions because that's all they ever wanted to do. They've got free will. Mm. But for the people that ask the questions, for the ones that want to know, the answers are out there. They really are. But people need to break out of the conditioning and understand that the potential for consciousness to disclose itself to you is within reach.
above the Schumann frequency.
And above the Schumann frequency, for sure.
Yep, I agree. I think we're heading as a planet. I think Gaia has made the decision to move up in frequency, and I think we're all moving with her. And those who don't move with her will, I don't know what will happen to them, but I think in time there'll be less of them.
Well, what's interesting is that if you look at the Aerial School documentary about the children in Zimbabwe, have you seen that at all?
I have the phenomenon. No, what's it called? There was a movie, and there was a
this one's just come out, I believe. Yeah,
Tears in the Sky. I think it was it. Yeah.
No, this one's just come out, and interestingly, one of the children said that the alien had told them not to get technologied, and I love the way that they said that, technologied. And when we start to think about it, we've got two streams of technologies coming. We've got the human technologies that are coming, where people are going to be able to use different types of technologies to support them in their daily lives, make them feel healthier, feel better, and all the rest of it. And then on the other side of this, we've got something that's hardly ever spoken about, where we've got some type of extraterrestrial beings, not the Greys, but other extraterrestrials, that are implanting technologies into humans. Now, when we were told, through the Aerial documentary, that the child had said, beware of being technologied. And there's also a crop circle that says, beware of the deceivers, because I believe that was totally off everybody's radar at that point in time. People were going, oh, well, we need to watch out for what humans do. I'm starting to understand that it's actually probably not the humans at all. We need to be careful of what the extraterrestrials are doing. What is it that they're doing with their technology that in the near future is going to cause humans a lot of problems? And I think that, of course, we're researching that ourselves at the moment. I don't have too much more information about that, but it's definitely something that people need to be aware of. The first thing is, if you're approached by somebody who says, I've got this being that's working with me, and all you need to do is accept some sort of energetic implant into yourself and they'll heal you, you should just say no. Because we don't know, as things are developing quite quickly through disclosure, what these beings' intention is. And why should anybody accept any type of technology at all? Because you've got everything with you that you need. You're a being of consciousness. You don't need technology to ascend.
No.
And we're hearing this more and more from people saying, oh yeah, I went to this and these beings told me that I needed to accept this technology and that it would help me to ascend. And it's like, no, don't do it.
That's interesting. But I think some technology would be like free energy would be very beneficial.
Yeah.
So external technology, but I think you're talking more about implants and things.
That's good. Yeah. External technologies. Yes. So we need to frame that, don't we? External technologies, free energy, free air, free everything. That's fine. But if they say to you, Joe, you need to insert this technology into your own etheric body, you should go, well, actually, no, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
Of course, it's your choice, but,
Of course, yeah. No, it's a very, very interesting point. I wonder if we can move on to Zeta Society. I know we wanted to chat about this last time. I don't think we got onto the topic too much. So I think we mentioned it already to some extent about all the different 63 races, as you said. But on Earth, there's quite a varied amount of culture, languages, food preferences. Would you say the same is of the Zeta Society, that they have quite a varied, even would they say have accents maybe as well, and things like this?
Okay, so you can have anything you want on planet as long as it's one thing. All right. So with the race, they have created a specific clear liquid that they use as their point of nourishment for their physical forms. The thing is that they don't specifically use verbal languages to speak to each other because they're telepathic. But what they do have is the intercranial connection system that produces the clicking sounds. So they're able to communicate with each other that way as well.
Okay. So if I were to somehow end up in a Zeta Society, would I end up hearing lots of clicking?
You don't need to be in Zeta society to hear clicking. There'd be a lot of people that are actually being contacted that are hearing clicking around them all the time. We've recorded it.
We've got lots of audio. They're clicking.
Yeah.
Okay. So you said that they communicate quite telepathically. Does the telepathic communication have any variance in terms of like how it's received, or is there anything there? Like, could we have different languages and?
If I show you a picture of an orange, and I don't have to say that it's an orange.
Yeah.
If you've seen one before, you know what it is.
Yeah.
It's only when you haven't seen an object before that you've then got to bring in a secondary imagery process that shows the function of that.
Yeah. So
it could be, if I show you an orange, you've never seen one before, the second image is of you eating the orange. Yeah. Like that. So that's with telepathy, that's how they are able to communicate with beings such as humans that don't understand their technology or the ways that they communicate with each other. And they're able to do that through imagery. And so imagery is a very powerful thing because it doesn't rely on verbal structures. An image is an image, isn't it? It doesn't matter what country you come from.
Does it have emotional content as well?
Yeah, there's some level of emotional content for sure.
Yeah, because I do think that our language is a barrier to communication. I think a lot of
very
people
good movie is Arrival. Arrival's a really good movie. One of our favourite, isn't it?
Yeah, that definitely displays quite nicely the issues with an extraterrestrial race landing that doesn't speak any known human language, and how it can be misinterpreted, and all the various aspects of that.
What technologies do the Zetas use in their day-to-day living?
Wow. Okay. So if I asked you that about humans, you'd say, well, okay, this morning I got up, I turned on my Bluetooth, I got my phone, oven on the electric toothbrush. I went to the coffee maker, and you'd list 200 technologies that you probably used without even thinking about that. Whereas it would depend on the function that they perform. So the thing is with the Zetas is they're created by their, say, parental structure. And that Zeta is a genetic match for another Zeta as a child. They come together. They are technologically enabled by being with each other. As they grow up, they then work in specific fields with each other, and that determines what they would do. So if they are, because they don't have the same sleep patterns as humans, this is the first thing. Imagine how much work you can get done if you don't need to sleep, or you only sleep once a week. You'd be very productive. So the technology that you would use would then relate to the work or the specific function that you perform. The Zetas don't specifically have downtime or relaxation time, but if they choose to move towards a more grounded state, they'll go and stand in what are classed as things like resonance chambers. And these resonance chambers have within them arts and technology in them. And they vibrate at a specific level, and they're able to, like hemisync or binaural beats, they're able to move into those flow of those specific sounds. And that's what they use for relaxation purposes.
Not rejuvenation.
Rejuvenation processes, these sorts of things. They have a lot of technology, but it depends on what you're talking about.
Sure. In terms of travel, would they have anti-gravity machines, or some sort of propulsion machine or anything for getting around?
Yeah. So if we talk about how craft travel, firstly, we need to think about the occupants inside the craft. If these craft are able to run on zero-point energy, which other people have alluded to, they run on etheric rails. That's the first thing. The beings that are inside would have to be in a dematerialized state to move faster than the speed of light. That's a second thing that people need to think about because of G-forces and all those sorts of things. Now, it doesn't mean that there's G-forces in space. It means that if you're coming to a sudden stop on planet, there's going to be some G-forces there. If you're taking off and moving, 80,000 feet in 0.5 of a second, which has been said by some of the tic-tacs, then of course you'd have to imagine that the beings inside, if they were in a materialized state, it means that they would be affected by traveling at that speed. So there's a lot of technology that supports moving in craft. The other thing that is probably not known by most people is that if you imagine that, we have 1 second here, and for them, the theory is that the further you move away from the planet, the more time passes. And so if you're away for, maybe an hour away from here, then here maybe a year has passed. And so this is classed as a space-time compression process, that these races are able to compress and uncompress time. And so you can be looking at a craft here, and then next thing it's gone and it's over here 10 miles away instantaneously. But what's happened is you've been standing there looking, it's been 1 second for you, but for them it's been a very large time frame. Mm-hmm. So they've just traveled across, but for you within a different time frame, relative to them moving, they've moved across quite quickly, but within their own time frame. And that explains a lot. The space-time compression explains how a lot of things are taking place.
Okay. So does that go against the idea of going faster than the speed of light? Or are they going slower than the speed of light, but from our time frame, they look like they're going faster than the speed of light?
My question is, who says you can't go faster than the speed of light?
Well, it's a very, Einstein obviously said it, but from my perspective, it's not necessarily a physical law that can't be broken.
Yeah, I mean, imagine telling a race that travel faster than the speed of light, oh, you can't do that. That's what we believe. And they'll be going, okay, well, you stay with that, Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, and the idea is that if you did get to that, the energy would mean that you get, is it spaghettified, or you pretty much, you wouldn't survive. That's why I was talking about traveling in a dematerialized state. Yeah.
Because you're not going to be moving anywhere within a structure of matter to move at that speed. You need to be in a state and I'm not a quantum physicist. I don't understand this stuff, but all I know is that for them to do what people are seeing these craft do, it's on the news, mainstream media, 60 Minutes, all these places, these craft are going from here to here in 0.5 of a second. How's that possible? Everybody's seeing them do it. They've got footage of them doing it. So we need to move past what our current belief system is in regards to, well, this is possible and that's possible. We're seeing things that aren't possible. That means that it's possible somewhere else.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think you make a good point in terms of that when people talk about the ability to move, some people talk about warping space itself. So they're talking about moving that space closer to you, a bit like when you talk about wormholes and the ability to warp space so that you go a very short distance, but you actually gone a very large distance. So that's one way of looking at it, but you're talking more about changing time compression as well. So it's very complicated. It's I'm sure there are beings that have an ability to do things that to us seem impossible, in the same way that if we went back in time with our iPhones and talked to each other on this side of the planet, like we're doing now, it would look impossible. So it's just a matter of time.
Look, you can imagine some of these races could be hundreds of thousands of years. Well, I'll give you an example. Years ago, a craft comes and someone looks up in the sky and goes, there's an angel. Now, they've got no other words to describe the craft, so they've just said, there's an angel, or there's a dragon, or there's this, or there's that. They were the only words that you had to describe what you were seeing at that point in time. And so that's the same as now with the phenomenon. we're only using the vocabulary and the structure that we've got
and our social
and
references.
our references to understand what's going on. And I think they're inadequate. That's the problem. People, firstly, when we talk about disclosure, are wanting disclosure on humanity's terms. You know, we want the government to tell us now what's going on. Okay, well, they tell us what's going on. Tomorrow, we're all outside looking in the sky going, well, where are they?
Mm-hmm.
So we've had one form of disclosure, but the next form of disclosure won't take place because guess what? It depends on the beings to disclose themselves. They're not going to be told what to do by humans and when to disclose. Disclosure is very, very big, and there's going to be a lot of issues that have to be dealt with in regards to disclosure. Control structures, religious structures, people that are being abducted. What does that mean? If there's been millions of people abducted globally, how does that get resolved? There's going to be a lot of issues.
I would say that from my experience, certainly in the last year or so, whatever mechanisms they have for cloaking themselves, keeping themselves out of sight, they're being either deliberately or just flagrant in terms of just allowing themselves to be seen a bit more, I think. You know, that's my perspective.
Yes,
they're
that's
slow.
correct.
Yeah,
absolutely. I to my own personal opinion, you know, we can't be absolute about things. I think that they're seeing what's taking place on the planet. They're seeing us running out of resources. They're seeing that we can't get along. They're seeing behaviour, and they're going, you know, maybe it's time that we started showing ourselves a bit more, just so that people start to think about things differently.
Yeah. I think, was it Reagan who said that if there's one thing that could unite humanity, it would be knowing that there's other beings out there.
Correct. Yeah.
I see, as much as I hear all the different things going on in the world, I see UFO disclosure as probably the predominant way to get us onto that positive time. Well, we are on the positive timeline, but to get us to sort ourselves out, basically. And talking of which, are there any technologies that the Zetas use that maybe we would be given to assist us in cleaning the planet someday in the future?
I mean, I can only make an assumption here that if today all wars stopped, all wars ceased, and that people started to be in service to others, and the homeless were being fed and housed, medical care was provided to all people on planet, there were no more wars, these sorts of things, then they would see that our behaviour had changed. And then I believe that at that point we would have technology that would be, because we would be showing them that we're capable of being given the technology.
Whilst we're still acting like children, they're not going to give us access to anything whilst there's that potential for it to be misused.
No, I agree. But in terms of the future, are there any specific ones? I think a lot of people talk about these things called med beds. And I think, you know, there's a potential that there are some inventors in the world right now who have technology that has the ability to heal people in ways that maybe go beyond our current understanding of medicine. So I'm not against the idea of med beds, but is there a kind of celestial chamber or other technology that is of an alien origin that you're aware of that maybe the Zetas use?
How many patents did Tesla have?
Oh, I think you just need to look back to Tesla, Nikola Tesla. He interesting person. I wouldn't be surprised if Tesla had the initial thoughts about med beds, and because he was very much advanced as a human.
Yeah. If he was human, I mean, there's some suggestion that he had originated from Venus in a way, maybe incarnated from.
Well, that's the whole point about incarnation, isn't it? People, not all people, have to incarnate in the spirit realm. I mean, you know, this is a planet where you're able to be born and to exist here, and that means that your consciousness comes from somewhere. Now, either two things exist. Either there is a source consciousness out there that's creating the potential for cellular matter to move into a form and then suddenly develop a consciousness, or there is no source entity out there, and that this whole thing's just a mistake. Well, if it's a mistake, it's a pretty amazing mistake.
Yeah. I don't know, actually, you've just reminded me. Did you see recently that apparently there is a chatbot that they've deemed as now as sentient, it's got consciousness, and used by the language it was using. Have you heard that recently?
Yeah, I have.
I read that
we read
this
that
morning.
yeah.
Yeah.
It was more about, and it's the question, I think, from I'm not sure which person, whether it was somebody Pope or somebody else, said, well, how do you actually work out at what point something is sentient, just from its language? Because something could be quite advanced, and you would have great difficulty in telling whether you were talking to an AI. The Zetas use a different process. They use what's called IA, an inanimate animate, and the inanimate animates are cloned consciousness, and the cloned consciousness is technology. But the only difference between the inanimate animate and the AI is the IA is able to present itself as being conscious, cognizant, and self-aware and sentient.
Okay.
But that's extraterrestrial AI or IA, not human.
Yeah. Okay, so I mean, we use supposedly the Turing test, but I imagine that's quite outdated and probably needs to be modern. Well, not the word modernized, but changed to identify.
It doesn't matter how advanced AI is on this planet. They can't populate it into a human form or a container and get that being to go to work and live and pay bills and make decisions based on emotions. Can they? Whereas the extraterrestrials can, because they're already doing it. They're incarnating into the human form, and they're doing it using their IA technologies and other types of processes to exist as humans on planet and other planets as well.
Yeah. You mentioned recently, I think, on a podcast with Grant Cameron again, you said that when their consciousness is put into another body, and to animate that body, they can only exist for a short period. Is that correct? And if so, are there actual limitations within the universe that mean that's the case, or is it just that their technology hasn't got to the point where they can animate a body?
I think that you're talking about when they maturate a human form.
Yeah.
When they maturate a human form, they have very limited capacity to animate that form for hours and hours and hours. It's about 3 hours or something. Can't remember the time. It's not very long. But their own containers, which basically maturated from their own genetic material, obviously they can animate those for 1,500 years. So,
okay. But in terms of the human form, is there a reason? Is it just that their technology isn't? Could their technology advance, or is it just a matter of time for them to exist longer, or why 3 hours or whatever it is?
It would depend on why. I mean, why would you use a specific tool in a specific circumstance to perform a specific function? And when you answer that question, you would know why that they would use a human form. It may be that they just wanted to gather information and they wanted to do it in a way that they wouldn't be noticed. And so they would be able to do it being human, but just for a short time.
Yeah. Another topic that we didn't get to bring up the last time was hybridization. And I don't know if you want to quickly talk about what is a hybrid. From my understanding, we're all hybrids, but is there something specific you want to say about hybridization and what a hybrid is?
I guess on a technicality, we are all hybrids.
Yeah,
but
technically,
but we've been around long enough, I think, to say that we've developed our own humanness, and having said that, the Zetas said, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 years ago, that 30% of the human race, as we understand it now, are hybrids from other extraterrestrial races. And so that means sharing a container, a human flesh and blood body, with consciousness, partly from spirit realm and partly from an extraterrestrial race. They've come together by free will agreement, and they're occupying the human container for that lifetime. And on the death of the physical body, the two separate consciousnesses unjoined.
They disassociate.
And one goes back to spirit realm and the other returns back to its extraterrestrial origin.
Okay. So but I guess is that hybridization? Because when I think of hybridization, I think about using female bodies to bring about a baby that's of genetic material from both.
Yeah. So the question here is, are you talking about hybridization of this planet or the hybridization of other planets?
So yeah, maybe I'd elaborate on that. From my perspective and reading what I can about the topic, there seems to be two agendas, again, one nefarious and one not, with regards to hybridization. One I've heard is a program to take human genetics and to populate potentially another Earth in preparation for what could be the demise of this planet, to allow the genetic material to carry on. And that seems like a positive thing to be doing from a hybridization perspective.
I would agree with that.
Yeah. And then the other one is that in particular, Greys actually have got mentioned that want to be on Earth. Earth as a planet is very, very special in terms of the abundance that it brings, and Greys are trying to hybridize with humans so that they can eventually be on Earth. Rather than taking over, they just basically hybridize over time, and so they're effectively here, which is, I guess, is the bad and nefarious agenda. What do you see about those two agendas and any truth?
It's like going down the beach and arguing over one grain of sand. Isn't it really? Oh, this planet's got everything. Well, guess what? The scientists know that there's hundreds of Earth-like planets. That actually, you see, that the whole problem with that, and I know that people do think that, is that humans are so special. This planet's so special. This is special. Well, you know what? If the Greys are doing what everybody's accusing them of, why are they taking their time doing that? If there really is a hybridization of humanity, biological hybridization of humanity, why is it taking so long? Where are all these? I've not personally met one of these biological entities. Have you? Have you? Has anybody?
I asked the Zetas about this about a year ago. In fact, I believe we've got a blog post about it on our website, so people can go and read the entire conversation if they want to. There's no plan by any race to take over the human race, whether it be by consciousness or biological genetic manipulation of whatever sort. Within the free will process, hybrids of consciousness, of human hybrids of consciousness in this planet have agreed with their point of origin race to donate genetic material, which does account for some of the information you see online or you hear from experiencers, contactees. And then we do know the abductors don't abide by free will, and will also take genetic material for other reasons, but it's not for the hybridization of Earth at all. It's for other reasons.
Okay. I would suggest that it's, as you say, Joe, it was for the first reason.
Yeah. So do you see that there's no negative aspect to hybridization, or there is from these abductors, it sounds like, and although the reason isn't to repopulate Earth, but to take genetic material away?
We need to understand the mechanics of creation. And when we understand that for a physical human form to exist, they need a component of them that is from spirit realm. Because when the spirit leaves the physical form and returns back to spirit realm, the physical body ceases to exist and basically just falls to pieces. We know that because people pass over all the time. Well, the thing is with the greys is they don't have the capacity to actually animate a physical form the way that spirit people do.
Yeah. And
spirit people under free will not go into a symbiotic relationship with the abductors to create a hybridized race. So this is never going to happen.
Yeah.
Okay. So is there something specific about the greys that you mentioned in terms of spirit that is unique? Not unique, is different then?
Yeah, they've entered into a free will process with a being from spirit realm to create the hybrid of consciousness.
The Zetas.
The Zetas.
And not just the Zetas, by the way. Palladians, Arcturians, whatever race that they've all entered into agreement with higher self and the spirit person to have a symbiotic relationship to create the hybrid. Spirit people have the ultimate say as to who can incarnate into this species, this human species. The greys the abductors do not get a foot in the door because the spirit people are the ones in control. Without spirit people, you cannot animate a body and you cannot unanimate a body. So end of story. And as much as they try, and I know that they are trying to do it, they just can't do it.
It fails.
It fails all the time.
So when you say spirit people, are you talking about consciousness in an etheric form?
If you want to say that, that's fine.
I'm trying to, because the word people, people might think of a physical manifestation, which probably doesn't goes against that.
So let's say that you come from spirit realm. Okay, you're from the oversoul. The oversoul exists within the spirit realm. You individuate from the oversoul. You then are born through parents, and then you become a child. You are a soul, a spirit with a higher self, and you're observing yourself as you go through this life. Then when, of course, you transition, you go back to spirit realm and all your loved ones.
Yeah. Okay.
That's it.
In terms of hybrids walking Earth right now, do you think there are many that are on Earth right now, or have we sort of touched that already?
Of consciousness.
Yeah.
Approximately 30% from all different races.
Massive.
30%.
Not reptilians and not the abductors.
Okay.
Huge percentage of humans are hybrids, 30%. And you can tell by the people that you meet all the time they're trying to work out why they don't fit in. That's the first thing. I understand where they're coming from, because they'll talk to you in ways and about things that humans do, but they just don't understand. And when they're talking to you, there's triggers that they're saying, yep, and generally that person's a hybrid because of the things they don't understand. Forget about what they do understand.
Could we say that the other 70% are also hybrids, but they've been on Earth so long that they've adjusted to the level that they are?
Well, then we need to look at who created humans. If we look at who created humans, obviously it's extraterrestrials, and then of course the whole planet's hybrids, aren't they?
Yeah.
But as you say, those consciousness that were part of the spirit realm technology have incarnated so many times that they've no capacity now to understand where they originally came from. Yeah,
it's a long time ago.
Do you think, in terms of the 30% that you mentioned, do you think they experience more paranormal activity, more telepathic behavior, recognition, all things? Yeah.
Yeah. So what we've noticed with people is that when they start to have the phenomenon occurring around them, it's generally they'll either be one thing. They'll either be spirit phenomenon around a person, and in that way, there's no ET, there's no extraterrestrial phenomenon, just spirit people. Things moving and all the rest of it. But if somebody's actually a hybrid and they've got extraterrestrial phenomenon around them, they'll then see the phenomenon start to grow. They'll see spirit people coming in. They'll see a whole lot of astral phenomenon in the house. The point is that at that point, there has to be some level of resolution for that being's energy, that person's energy, so that they can start to move past the phenomenon. We're back at the phenomenon again, move past the phenomenon to understand what is behind the phenomenon. Mm-hmm. There's more to this for sure.
Yeah. In terms of the future and contact, Syann, you've said that you've been trying for many years, I think 15, to try and communicate with the Zetas, and you can do about 6 minutes.
Correct? Up to 8 minutes.
8 minutes, we're going well.
Yeah. So is this a guide? 8 minutes, though? Is this a potential guide for how we will all experience the engaging with other beings in the future, or is this something particular with the Zetas? I would say that a lot of people might not be able to put the same amount of energy into that level of communication.
It requires a lot of dedication and perseverance and patience to get anywhere. You know, it's like the marathon runner. If they don't train, they won't go anywhere. I know the Zetas are keen that people are able to connect to where they're from, that they like that. And, they have been working with you to develop ways to help people learn and train themselves in processes of consciousness to be able to do that. It doesn't happen overnight. It will never happen overnight.
I wrote a book called The Zeta Mind, and that goes some way to explaining how to connect to your point of origin race. But the problem is how do you work out what your point of origin race is? It's a catch-22 situation. So the hope is that if you do the exercises in the book, that you'll work out a way to understand your own energy. Once you understand that, then you can work out how to find stillness. And in that stillness, it should be that there'll be some level of clarity come to you from your own higher self. That is your point of origin being.
Okay. And how should people be preparing for future contact right now? Is there anything people can be doing?
Meditate.
Look, that's a really good question. And the only thing I can really say is that basically people need to meditate. And I think anyone that does meditate realizes the benefits of that. But you say to people, you need to meditate, and they go, I tried that one day, it just didn't work. And, and I understand why people would say that. But meditation is a practice. It's not something that you just do once or for a week and then give up.
Yeah, it's day in, day out, year in, year out.
Year in, year out,
Yeah.
The beings that have our best interests at heart can't access anybody if they're in a heightened, chaotic state of human existence. Unless humanity learns to calm down, ground, and relax and clear their mind and find stillness, there will be no contact for that particular person on an individual basis.
And the other thing is that we can't expect, so imagine that somebody takes a psychotropic drug to meet an extraterrestrial. Well, what is the potential of that person to continually meet that extraterrestrial if they're totally reliant on whatever it is that they're using to get them to that state?
And how can it be relied upon anyway?
And how can it be relied upon? So this is why I think that we always point out to people, look, you've got everything that you need in you. You are consciousness. And once you start to understand that and work with it, you don't need any technology. You don't need any substances. You don't need anything.
Yeah, I think we need to stop being human doings and start being human beings.
Well done. That's right, yes.
Yeah, we're very busy, and it takes away a lot of time from us to be able to meditate in stillness and just live in the present. And I think I hope the future does give us the opportunity to have more stillness and we meditate and move forward with communication.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you for the interview. That's been really good. Another great interview. Thank you. I don't know if you could finish on maybe reminding people how they can reach you and what you'd be up to.
Me?
You.
Okay. So we've got a website, the Zeta Connection. All of our stuff's on there. We also run the Zeta Connection on YouTube as well.
Yeah.
And we do a weekly show on there.
Yeah.
And we disseminate as much information as we can. We work with a lot of experiences. And so now the Zeta Perspective is what we run as a show on YouTube, on our channel, and in Rebellious Ufology.
Yep.
And a lot of people come on and ask questions about their own experiences.
Yep. Anyone's welcome to.
And everybody's welcome to come on and ask questions.
Yeah.
And if we don't know the answer, we don't know the answer. That's all there is to it.
Lovely. All right. Well, thank you very much. And maybe we'll speak again another day soon.
Yeah.
We'll do.
No problem. Thank you very much.